facing the wrong way.
Rather not be on this today.
You sure?
There
you go.
If you have your questions on something done. Feel all nasty from work still. I'm lucky I'm in a different
How are we doing, friends? Good. That was terrible. How are we doing, friends? Good. Good. I'll take the grade. How are we? How was the quiz? Okay. Okay. What was difficult?
Just having to find the resources.
Okay. Give a specific example so I can make it easier.
The one that was the critical media theory,
Okay.
I feel like we didn't talk about that at all.
Okay.
Yeah, and I couldn't find it. Like on Google, you had to use like other things that, or it was called other things, and then I was like, I hope this is the same.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Good context. What else?
I just had difficulty. Like I was gonna have like the slides from the first night on my computer as I was taking the quiz, but it wouldn't load. So I was just like, it's fine. I'll just take it without that.
One of the issues, which I debated, is when you, as much as we all love GIFs, when you put GIFs into PowerPoint, it makes it ginormous. So you actually have to download it in order for that to happen, because it will never load.
It would get
spin
like
forever.
3/4 of the way downloaded, and it said error, and like it failed. So I tried like 3 times, and I was like, it's not. I'll just. I did that too.
Okay. What I might do is try and zip it and then make it easier for you guys. I'll try and do that for tonight's slides. What else? How's the paper coming? Is it done? Okay. So tonight we're going to have 3 guests, which I've never done 3 back to back to back, so we'll see how this goes. Garrett Ellison from MLive will be here from 7 to 7:30. Jordan Carson from Wood TV8 and OTV4 will be here from 7:30 to 8. And then we will go to the Skyposphere and bring in my friend Jason Punzo, who works in the record industry, from 8 to 8:30. And then we'll see how that all works, okay? So one of the things, I understand that this is a Monday night class, and I understand that there's a finite amount of space in everybody's brain. So depending on where we are at 8:30, we might not get through all the slides. So I will say this as a concession to all of you guys. If we don't get through all the slides, and you have difficulty with the quiz, ping me and let me know where you're having difficulty. Don't tackle it on your own. I mean, some of you have emailed me and know that I'm super responsive, so ping me however you want to, and we can work through that if we don't get through everything tonight. I just thought it was much more important for you guys to listen to people who actually do these things for a living than do stuff that happens in the book. So, everyone good with that? Okay, cool. All right, so last week, what happened, right? We talked about mass media and what it was. We talked about the first mass medium that Gutenberg essentially invented. We also talked about culture as it relates to communication and the cultural model of communication. And we also talked about the 4 stages of mass media innovation. I won't always do a recap of the week prior, but every once in a while, in fact every semester, something serendipitous happens and crazy things in the news happen. So last week, I put this slide up, and about half of you didn't even know what in the Sam Hell Twitch was. right? So for some of you, we were here. But then this week, this happened. So what happened was this gentleman's name is Ninja. He is the best Fortnite player on the planet. And his dear friend Drizzy decided that they wanted to play together on Twitch. And so what happened on last Tuesday night, so the night after class, is you have a video game being played all across the planet on Twitch that is a 4-person team that consisted of Drake, Travis Scott, Juju Smith, and this kid, Ninja. So we moved very quickly from the, I don't know what the heck this is, to 1.5 million people watching a video game on TV. I bring this up, guys, because this is how fast this whole thing moves, right? Is that we go from something being totally obscure to everybody who isn't a gamer to something that's being consumed in mass. And this is important not necessarily for Fortnite, although it could be. This is important for things like Twitch as they try and make the move into the bigger mediums like TV. The other thing that happened, and this happened today, we talked about the Internet of Things. I told you it could kill you, and it can. Uber had a huge accident today with one of their autonomous vehicles. It hit a pedestrian, and this is the first one in history. So part of this class is we look at these events and see how do we go forward. Do we stop doing this altogether? Do we ask more questions? Why did this happen? I mean, this happened today, so a lot of these questions are unanswered. But when we start bringing robots and the Internet of Things into the world, these sorts of things can happen and will happen more and more. One of the things that happened with one of the first crashes is that the self-driving car, I don't know if you guys saw the story, was driving next to a semi-truck. That semi-truck was all white on the side. So even though it's surrounded by cameras, the cameras read it as sky and plowed right into it because the cameras don't really recognize space the same way that we do. So things like this will happen, and we'll tackle them every week as they come up, because one of the most interesting things about this class and why I like teaching it is because everybody here in this room gets different news. We're not even talking about the same news because we're not reading the same news. So I like to bring up some stuff that's happening as it's happening so we can tackle these things. And we're going to talk about them for the next hour or so before Garrett gets here. The other thing that happened today, and again, this is super early, but Ford unveiled what they call Ready Shop Go online. Why is this important? Well, this is important for a couple reasons. One, because this is a Michigan-based company in a state where owning a Tesla that you bought from a dealership is actually illegal. You can't buy a Tesla in Michigan because the big three have stopped Tesla from being here. So this is fascinating to me that Ford is looking to get rid of dealerships in hopes that people will buy cars online, because it goes counter to making things like Tesla not available in the state of Michigan. So this is something else that I find super interesting. We also talked about cultivation theory, this idea that as you observe things in the world, so if you sit around and watch TV news all the time, you think everybody is a terrorist, everybody is trying to rob you, everybody is out to get you, because that's the news that you consume. I share this with you because this is what I actually want to talk to you for a little bit, or talk about, I should say. How many saw this story over the weekend? Anybody? It's okay if it's no. Okay. So this is the Rockford Mire at 10 Mile. And as you can see, the Facebook post is unfounded. What does that mean? Well, on Saturday, not this past Saturday, but the following Saturday, the Saturday before we started class, there was a woman and her 5-year-old daughter running around Mire, and they went to the bathroom and they came out, and this gentleman was coming out of the bathroom at the same time. And they thought that was weird because he didn't have a cart and he didn't have a basket. And so as they kept shopping, the woman kept thinking this gentleman was following her. And so at one point, this point right here, she turns around and takes a photo of him and says, "Stop following me." Then it gets crazy. So she goes to a private moms group on Facebook and shares the story with the photo. Somebody in the private moms group takes the story and the photo and shares it publicly on what is called the Rockford Services Group. So this is about 80,000 human beings that complain about plumbers and where to get the cheapest avocados and so forth and so on. This story shows up on Saturday. It then gets shared 8,003 times. That number's not even the big one, because that's not even taking into, no, that's great, because that's how the news, this is how we consume news. News tells you it's been shared 8,003 times. That's people sharing it, who also have their own network. So imagine this gentleman is outed as a pedophile sex trafficker to maybe 2 million people.
Can you see his face?
You can't, well, in the original post, yes, Wood TV8 doesn't want to get sued, so no, you can't.
Couldn't tell if it was like
Wait,
number
why?
9.
Why would they get sued if he isn't guilty?
Well, he isn't guilty. I haven't got to that
Okay,
part,
okay.
but he isn't.
So is
But-
that why they chose to not show his face though?
Yes,
Okay.
because now 2 million people see this thing, and what happens is on the Rockford Services site and other sites, people start going, yeah, I've seen that guy at Target. He must be a repeat offender. I've seen that guy at Walmart on Alpine. He's totally a repeat offender. The world is on fire, right? And the problem with this is twofold. One, sex trafficking is a real thing in Grand Rapids, a very real thing in Grand Rapids. In fact, it's worse around Art Prize when there's 500,000 human beings wandering around downtown. So it's not to discourage the fact that this thing doesn't happen. The problem is he's a 55-year-old retired fireman who was looking for his wife who was shopping at Meijer.
That's terrible.
Poor guy.
So there's a couple things to handle here, right? If you're a woman and you feel threatened, you certainly have the right. That's your perspective at that moment. That's not the problem. I don't mind that she felt threatened. She should go to the service desk, which she said she did. They should call the police, which they said she did. But then what is this gentleman's rights after that? Does she get to put him on Facebook and call him a sex trafficker? Because, like, I look at this story and I think to myself, I was telling my wife when this part of the story came out, because we both saw this, because we're in Rockford, we both saw the thing on Saturday, and well, that's crazy, right? And then that was it. But then Tuesday night when we're sitting watching TV and she's like, oh, that thing wasn't even real, I'm thinking to myself, so imagine we're sitting in the same instance on Tuesday evening watching Jessica Jones, and you turn to me and ask me if I'm a pedophile sex offender because I'm on the Rockford Services group, which is a very real concern for somebody like me who has 2 young kids who may or may not shop at 9 o'clock at night because it's the only time he can do it because he teaches at Aquinas, right? And maybe if I just need milk, I don't have a cart. I don't have a basket, right? And so we're at this point where there's a couple things going on. One, is she allowed to take a photo of him? 2, is she allowed to share it with a private group? 3, is she responsible if it takes off? And 4, can he sue all of them? Every single person that calls him a sex trafficker, does he get to sue them all?
No, but he gets to sue the original post, like whoever posted the original, because that's defamation of your name. So, I mean, you can take your small claims for it, honestly.
Go ahead.
Don't you need someone's permission to take a photo?
I don't know, do you?
I don't know, that's just like, I guess I never looked it up legally, but.
Yeah, you always have to say.
Yeah.
Because you get to this question where, like, okay, so if you're walking outside and someone takes a photo of you, do they have the right to do that? Because you're in a public space. Go ahead.
I think legally the poster would be protected because it's freedom of speech and it's not technically slander because like it's under like personal protection kind of thing, you know. So it's like almost a less severe than like self-protection.
But she's calling him a sex trafficker.
So let's rewind the clock. I'm with you.
She completely believed that, so she wasn't like lying and going out of her way to slander him.
I'm not, again, this is why this is such a fascinating case to me. I don't disagree with you up until she goes on Facebook.
Okay.
Right? Like, she has every right to go to the service desk, has every right to call the cops, has every right to look at the surveillance footage. This is where I think we cross the line. Go ahead.
Like, I don't understand, like, what's the point of taking a picture? Because don't they all have, like, cameras in those stores to, like, see the person? Like, yeah, like, I do believe, like, she did the right thing going to, like, the service people and having them have the cops called. But they also have cameras in the store, too. So, like, she didn't really have to take the pictures. Like,
maybe, but again, like, it's hard to put ourselves in that situation. She might think that that's her only line of defense in the store, is that now I have your photo, and that photo is now on my iCloud account. So if anything happens to me, there's a way for us to chase you down. Go ahead.
But do you know what the original post said? Because if she posted on Facebook, it was like, saw this guy at Meijer, he's a sex trafficker, which she has really no...
Well, it's about 22 paragraphs long and does land at that place.
serious?
Yes.
Post the entire story of
Yeah,
shopping
the
trip.
entire story. Like, and then I bought celery, and he's still a sex trafficker. And then I put an avocado in my cup. Right, like it goes on forever.
But the people who share it are,
Chapter.
people who share are protected by certain laws.
Avocado.
People should know.
Well, so they're not. But what's interesting, and I didn't put this up here because I didn't want to spend all night talking about this as much as I could. What was interesting is all the people on the Rockford Services site, or a lot of them, that were saying, I saw him at Target, must be a repeat offender. 3 days later, like, what can we do to stop this in travesty against this guy and his innocence? Well, let's start with what you did and go back from there. So, again, guys, when we're talking about the internet and what our rights are, this becomes a very scary proposition because it's not only happening here. When you read the Wood TVA story, it happens all the time. People just taking photos and posting them in private groups and saying, this person did blah. And one, this guy doesn't even know he ends up on Facebook. I forgot this part of the story. He doesn't realize he shows up on Facebook till his wife gets served the post. So then this guy has to call the cops and say, hey, I'm that guy in the thing. I didn't do anything, but I'll come in and talk to you if you want me to. But I'd like help, right? So if she doesn't see it, this thing never stops. If the wife's not on Facebook, it never stops. Because she looks at him and goes, what WTF? Husband, right? Like, I left you alone for 3 minutes in the toy aisle. Like, what happened? I don't...
So what if this story was like the exact same situation, but then it turns out he was, like the cops were looking for him or were suspected of him? Then would we also be saying like, this is wrong, this is unethical? So like, that's where I'm sort of like, it's just the outcome that is then like basing whether it's okay to do it or not. Like if this were to catch a repeat sex offender or a sex trafficker, we would all be like praising the woman for putting it on. And like, I don't know what, like, whether that's good or not.
Well, now you're talking philosophy, right? That's the categorical imperative.
Yeah.
Is it right for everybody to take a photo of everyone in every situation and put it on Facebook? If yes, do it. If not, never do it, right? And you're 100% right, that would be what we would be doing. I also don't know that that's correct morally, though. Because, like, again, you can ascribe any group of human beings into this poor guy's bucket and go, if we take photos of every blah, 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 and we catch 1 out of 1,000,000, are we doing God's work here, right? Or are we just putting 999,000 human beings on blast that didn't do anything, right? There was a hand back
I
here.
mean, I have my hand up, but it was just kind of, if she would have gone to the police and shown that photo, then maybe things would have gotten caught that way. Like, sharing it on Facebook might not have helped it more than what the police could help with, like, private looking into that.
You, and then you. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I feel like if she had gotten like some sort of solid, yes, this guy is a sex trafficker, about like if he had actually tried to do something, or if she showed the picture to the police and they're like, yes, we're looking for him,
Right.
and then she posted it. But I think it was kind of.
And going off of that too, like if she had the proof, but also like the place that she put it is a place where it's going to be getting a lot of attention. Like if she just posted it on her own wall, like all her friends would have seen it, but they wouldn't have been as like high alert as the mom group would have been to begin with. I feel like. 'Cause
Well,
especially, like-
and push that a step further, right? How
Yeah.
many of them read the whole thing?
Right.
Right.
Two paragraphs, they're like, oh, the only thing that really stands out is not the avocados, or like, you kind of followed me, but it's sex offender and pedophile, and they don't really see the full story from it.
Right, and then you share it with her, and she shares it with her, and then I see it, and all I get is sex trafficker, because the avocado stuff is already gone, right? Yeah, so 100%. Anyone else? And we'll move on. Go ahead.
Yeah, until you have something to fully post, I just don't see why she thought that was necessary at all. You know, until like you said, the police report is in, or maybe if it was like just super known or he did something super inappropriate and maybe got away somehow, it's like, hey, just letting you know this happened, this guy is out there. But now it's just like that little uncomfortable feeling. Yeah, I get it, I felt uncomfortable in public too, but like, I can't accuse someone until I have like a reason. I don't know, I just think that's crazy that she felt the need to do that.
It is crazy. Let's sit in her shoes for a second though, right? Because we talked about this a little bit last week and we'll talk about it for 8 straight weeks. It's like, we don't understand this yet. Right?
Yeah.
We do things that we don't even know what the ramifications are. Because I know without a shadow of a doubt, because Rockford, for as large as it seems, is pretty small. So like, it took me 4 seconds to find her, right? A friend of a friend, and we're there. Like, she never shared it going, how do I get this to 2.2 million people, right? That was not her intent. And that's the other part of this that gets super interesting, is we don't even know what we're doing.
Right.
We're running around with this technology going, what happens if?
Like,
right?
what went through her head before posting it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was her intentions of, like, if I post this, blank will happen?
Well, I think,
You know.
so I don't know, right, because I'm not her,
Right.
but I would wonder if it's a private moms group, if her sense is to share it with her best friends on Facebook, who have friends who are now in this group, who then have friends, and it amplifies, right? Because you see that happening a lot, especially with any one of these private groups where this stuff happens all of the time. Like, we have a private neighborhood group where crazy stuff like this shows up. I'll give you an example. Probably September, October of last year, all of them started posting frantically and raising the red flags on a Sunday morning because there was a weird car driving slowly by their houses, and they wondered what he was doing. And I had to go, not because I work there, but because, like, I have synapses that connect. Like, it's Sunday morning, it's the newspaper. Like, can we chill out, guys? Like, But that's where we are, is like, as soon as something, you know, and that's, again, why you live in a community like that, is because people watch each other's back, but we know not what we use, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we raise the, if that poor guy in the car that's delivering the Grand Rapids Press, if the same thing happened to him, if he doesn't have the sticker on it, or it's on the wrong side, or whatever, we're in the same situation, right?
So what do you think? Do you think that he is in the right for a lawsuit or not?
I don't think he's going to, but
Well, you think, yes, he can.
I think step one would be to prove damages, right? Like, well,
People saw that. Right?
but does that damage you though? Like, it depends on your point of view.
I mean, okay, that's true because they didn't put his name in it, right? So.
Well, not only did I put his name in it, but like, for example, like, let me give you a real world example that's on a much smaller scale. There's 26 people in here. If all 26 of you in 8 weeks tell Aquinas, I am the worst professor you've ever had in your entire life, that won't bother me in the slightest. Because that's not how I measure my life, right? But there are some people where that would ruin their life. What did I do wrong? Let me call all of them and see how, right? Like, that's not, so you would have, I don't know him at all, but, you know, it depends on how he feels about 2 million people thinking this, because the other part of it is 2 million people thought it, 87 read the retraction,
How was that?
right? Like, because I don't know the exact number, but not every single person that shared it knows that it's fake. So I don't know what the damages are, but I think he would have to figure that out and decide whether or not he wanted to go down that route. Because again, when we're talking about what's the categorical imperative, do I want to start this all over again? Because now I'm just returning fire, right? Now I'm going to ruin your life. And then you're going to ruin somebody else's life, right? So somebody has to stop it and go, look, this was insane, and you probably need to press pause on the send button, but I'm not going to sue you, right?
I have two things I just thought of when he was talking.
Go ahead.
The first thing I would be wondering is if she had called the police while she was at the store, or she went to the service desk or whatever, and then would she have posted it after the fact that she talked to the police and got home, but then would the police say that there's nothing wrong?
Well,
Why
so-
would she still feel the need?
So I don't think it was that. I think your timeline is correct. I don't see, the police actually watched all the surveillance footage. I don't think they do that in real time, right? So I think she goes to the service desk, says, hey, Nick, this guy's following me around, I don't know what's going on. All right, let me call the police. And the police show up and we go, hey, here's the photo, I don't know what's going on. All right, well, we'll get back to you. You're okay, take your kid, go home.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you and we'll watch the surveillance footage. So she now has 24, 48, 36 hours of not knowing where she can jump on her group and start posting. What was the second thing?
The second thing was, So this Facebook post is going around, and then was it taken down, or is the news that came out?
No, it's since been taken down, I think,
I
because
was saying, or is like, how many people are actually going to see that, like, oh, this is actually fake if they're watching the news, because some people only get their information from certain places. Now, if they all don't watch the news, they don't, like, every single person that saw it before may not know that it wasn't.
One, and yes, because to that point, when I saw it, it was in our neighborhood group, and it doesn't tell you it disappeared, it's just not there anymore. So if I'm not scrolling down and going, I wonder what things got rescinded today, I would never have known had I not bumped into this, right? All right, one more story. So for those of you who emailed me talking about internet privacy and things to talk about for paper topics, this is a great one. The Cloud Act is a piece of legislation that essentially empowers the Attorney General and members of Congress to do this really interesting thing. It gives it power to bypass any current law without approval from Congress to spy on American citizens without a warrant.
Through the cloud?
Through anything.
Oh.
It's called the Cloud Act because they're going to use the cloud. It's also called the Cloud Act because for the first time, this piece of legislation also includes foreign governments. So if foreign governments decide that you are doing something they don't like, they can also take all of your data with no warrant. For those of you who aren't up on your civics, right, there's part of the Constitution tells people that we have this safety built in that this act sort of takes away. So again, if you're looking for something in the privacy world to talk about, this Cloud Act is super new from Friday afternoon. So it's worth looking into because again, I think a fair amount of people certainly aren't paying attention to this, also aren't paying attention to this, which is, you know, kind of the amped up version of the Patriot Act, if you know what the Patriot Act is. So I just wanted to point that out. We are going to have Garrett at 7 o'clock. Before we do that though, I want to talk a little bit more about privacy, and I want to talk a little bit more about it in the context of Edward Snowden and Glenn Greenwald. So we're going to watch his TED Talk for about 18 minutes and talk about that until Garrett shows up, and then we'll go from there.
There is an entire genre of YouTube videos devoted to an experience which I'm certain that everyone in this room has had. It entails an individual who, thinking they're alone, engages in some expressive behavior, wild singing, gyrating, dancing, some mild sexual activity.